I believe whatever doesn't kill you simply makes you stranger.
Shane Worth was enjoying his first day of summer vacation. Technically, that day was Saturday, as his last day of school was the previous Friday, but today felt like the first true day of vacation. No school, no homework, and all day to do whatever he pleased. Shane still had the feeling as if he should be in school, and it added an exciting sense of freedom to his day. Like most days, he started off with getting on his phone to check social media notices and messages. Not much going on there. Mostly cat videos and duck-face selfies, although the one with the trailer to an upcoming movie was pretty exciting. Afterward, he went downstairs to make breakfast, where he found a note from his mother and $50.
Shane, I didn't want to wake you up on your first day of summer vacation. I got saddled with a business trip out of nowhere and had to leave early this morning. You're 15 now, so I figured you'll live without me for a couple days. You can always call Grandma in case of an emergency. There's plenty of food in the house, but here's some money to order pizza and have some fun. No parties. I'll be home Wednesday. P.S. No parties. I mean it, mister. Love you, Mom.
Shane read the note and looked approvingly at the money on the table. Sweet. Shane wasn't much for parties anyway, so he found it amusing that his mother would put such emphasis on that part. He fried himself up some bacon and eggs and went to sit down on the couch in his living room. Shane plopped down on the couch and put his feet on the coffee table, something his mother would never let him do if she were home. With a grin, he grabbed the TV remote and dug into his breakfast. After a few minutes, he glanced out his front window and noticed some movement across the street. He focused on finishing his breakfast before checking it out further. He folded his bacon, impaled it multiple times with his fork, before utilizing the last centimeter of unoccupied fork to stab into his eggs, then shoveled the entire thing into his mouth. Chewing laboriously, Shane set his plate down on the coffee table and walked to the front window. He noticed an old lady across the street was having a garage sale. He squinted his eyes, trying to focus a little more on what the woman had laid out on the tables. He observed lots of clothes and knickknacks and lamps, along with some other chintzy objects. Typical old folk stuff, he thought. He was sure that there wasn't anything he would want in the massive piles of old lady stuff. Just as Shane went to move the curtain back over the window, he noticed her heaving something large on one of her tables. He wasn't sure what it was until she lifted a large computer keyboard and sat it next to the bigger device. Huh? Computer? Neat. Maybe I'll go take a look, he thought. He slipped on his shoes and walked out the front door. He crossed the street towards the old woman's house. As he approached her driveway, he zeroed in on the table with the big computer. He went straight to the boxy, beige object on the table to confirm his suspicions. It was definitely a computer, and a really old one at that. Some might even call it an antique. Next to it sat an old-school keyboard and a small box of 5 1/4-inch floppies. He examined the computer and marveled at its condition. For being as old as it was in great shape, even with the massive amounts of dust that had accumulated on it. The old woman took notice of Shane's presence and approached him.
Well, hi there, young man. Got an interest in computers, do you?
The small old lady gave Shane a snaggletooth grin. She seemed nice, even though she could have come straight out of a Grimm's fairy tale. Shane was still examining the technological relic. Yes, ma'am. I've built a few over the years, and I've read about this model online, but I've never seen one in person. Whoever had it took great care of it.
Well,
the woman started, her face becoming somber.
It was my son's. I bought it for him on his 14th birthday.
She pressed her gnarled finger against her wrinkled lips.
It's been almost 30 years now. He sure loved that thing. He would play it from the second he got home from school until it was time to go to bed.
Shane flipped open the lid of a small box of floppy disks next to the computer and started rifling through them. He noticed that many of them had been very popular games in their time. With all these games he had for it, I bet he did. I'm surprised he hasn't come home to grab it. This is great stuff, really hard to find. So why are you selling it? The woman sighed heavily. You see, my son, Josh, went missing when he was about your age. I never wanted to part with any of his stuff, just in case he came home. All these years, I've finally been able to bring myself to clean out his room. I kept his room just as he left it for a lot of years in the hope that he would turn up, but it never happened. When my husband died last year, I guess I was finally able to bury Josh along with him. I was boxing up his clothes and old toys to donate when I remembered he had this thing. I figured I could make a little money on it in the garage sale. Wow. Sorry to hear about Josh, Shane said. I feel kind of bad now. Oh, don't worry about that. The woman reassured him with a wave of her gnarled hand. You didn't know. And besides, I'd rather it go to someone who will enjoy it than in some landfill. Shane smiled at her and nodded. All right. How much are you looking to get for it? Oh, I don't know. How much does something like this go for nowadays? Shane smiled even wider. This model computer was a rare find and usually sold for several $100s online, despite it having no real modern functional value. Shane's smartphone was several thousand times more powerful than his computer, but he had a chance at buying a piece of a computer enthusiast's dream. Would you take $20? He asked. The woman tapped her chin as she pondered the offer for a moment. I was going to put it up for twice that at least, but I could tell you really enjoy it, and that means a lot to me. It's nice to think that one of Josh's old things will get some use again, so yes, 20 will be just fine. Shane pulled a 20 out of his pocket and handed it to the woman. Thanks. I can't wait to try it out, he said. He heaved the extremely large and heavy computer up to his chest. He looked down at the keyboard, monitor, and box of floppy disks. Can I come back for these in a few minutes? The woman was now attending to another customer that wanted to know about a lamp in obnoxious detail. Sure thing. I'll keep them on the table for you. Shane looked down at all the pieces. It was going to take him at least 3 trips to get it all home. He grunted as he carried the computer across the street and into his house. Shane set it down gently on the hall table and ran back to the woman's driveway to grab the rest of the equipment. Stacking the keyboard and box of floppies on top of the computer's monitor, he picked it up carefully and carried it back to his house. Shane was grinning excitedly as he set everything down and looked at it all. His day had already started out great. His first day of summer vacation, then he discovered he had the house completely to himself for the next 2 days. Now he just bought a valuable collector's item in great shape for only $20. He pulled out his phone and took a picture of it and sent it to his friend Jay. A couple of minutes, Jay texted him back. Whoa! How'd you get that? I bought it for $20. No shit? No shit. You gonna hook it up? No, dingus, I'm gonna smash it. Of course I'm hooking it up. Can I come over and see it? Sure. My mom's gone for the next couple days. We'll get pizza later. Awesome. See you soon. Shane put his phone down and readied himself to pick the heavy system up again. He carried it up the half-landing stairs and down the hall into his room. He set the large computer on his writing desk, placing it down gently to make sure the cheap veneered particle board surface could handle the weight. It creaked slightly but held fast. He repeated the trip down and up the stairs to bring the rest of the setup. After hooking everything up and plugging it in, he flicked the power switch on, and with a dull cackle of electricity, it hummed to life. As it booted up, the computer made a loud, etching-like sound with beeps and buzzing that concerned Shane at first. However, within a couple of minutes, a blank screen with nothing but a blinking cursor displayed on the monitor. Just then a loud knock came from the front door downstairs. It's open! Shane yelled down, assuming it was Jay. A second later, he hears the front door open and shut, followed by rapid footsteps pounding their way up the stairs. A lanky 15-year-old kid with unkempt blonde hair, terrible acne, and a shirt that was 2 sizes too big for him stood in the doorway. It was Jay. So, did you get it working? Jay looked as excited even more than Shane. He too loved computers. Shane waved his hand in the direction of the computer. Yeah, it's working, I think. All it's doing is sitting there with that little line blinking on the screen. The cursor, you mean? Jay responded. I looked this thing up before coming over. It doesn't have a GUI, so you have to put in a disk and type a command. Shane arched an eyebrow. Damn, no icons? That's really old then. Shane knew his way around a PC, but Jay was better versed in some of the older technology, so Shane was glad he was around for this. "Yeah, you're not far off there," Jay said, flipping through the box of floppies. "Wow, there's some good shit in here." "I know, right?" The lady across the street had no idea what it was worth. She sold it to me for $20. Jay's eyes went wide for a second. "Wait, across from your house? Like the one straight across the street from you?" "Yeah, why?" "Holy shit, man. This is Josh Simmons' old computer," Jay exclaimed. "Yeah, so?" "The lady told me that already. She said her kid went missing like 30 years ago or something. She finally decided to clean out his stuff. She put this out for a garage sale this morning, and my mom left me $50 for whatever, so I bought it. Dude, my dad was Josh's best friend back in the day. He used to tell me how they would hang out and play on this thing until like 4 a.m. some nights. He was really traumatized when his best friend went missing." "Wow. That is a bummer," Shane said. "Well, sounds like it'll be a night of some retro fun for us, though. So how do I get one of these games going?" "Here, move for a second. I'll show you." Jay nudged Shane out of the way. He sat down, grabbed one of the floppies, and pushed it into the drive, turning a knob that locked the disk in with a click. Now that it's locked in, you can type a command, usually this one, and it should start loading whatever's in the drive. Jay typed disk1-run, then tapped the enter key. Immediately afterward, the disk drive's indicator lit up, and the machine started making heavy mechanical whirring and clicking noises. After about a minute of strained sounding, clicks, and snapping, the screen displayed the word loading. The noises settled down to a steady, dull hum with slight swishing noises as it read the disk. The computer made its own etching-like sounds as it loaded the program. Finally, after a solid 3 minutes of waiting, a racing game loaded on the screen with beeping background music. Jay pressed enter again, and the game started a race. The graphics were representative of its time, very blocky and unimpressive by today's standards. The sounds were limited to electronic humming and toned beeps. He played it for a few minutes as Shane watched, thinking that while he would find this boring very quickly, kids from 30 years ago would have seen this as revolutionary. After finishing a race, Jay quit the program and ejected the disc. He spent the next several hours sampling the disc pile. They played around with all sorts of old adventure and role-playing games, getting lost in some of them despite their lack of familiarity and dated storylines. There was a learning curve to these old games, and progress wasn't rewarded so easily, which gave the experience a rustic charm to the two boys. Before Shane even realized how much time had passed, the sun was setting outside and gradually darkened his bedroom. Jay was watching him play an old dungeon-crawling game when his cell phone started ringing. He walked out of the bedroom and answered the call, coming back after a few minutes and looking irritated. "Well, I gotta bail. My parents want a date night and I have to watch my little sister. Looks like it'll be another summer of babysitting to run for me," he sighed. "I was gonna order us a pizza," Shane protested. "Not much I can do. I'll come back by tomorrow." Jay shrugged and startled down the hall with a wave. "All right," Shane said as he got up from his new computer reluctantly. Shane walked Jay out and peeked at the darkening sky. He observed a few fireflies hovering around his yard as the warm humidity of a Midwestern summer clung to his skin like glue, making him feel instantly sweaty. Just as the strands of his hair began to frizz, he shut the door and locked it. He then called his mother to check in with her before he ordered a pizza. Shane moved to the kitchen island and passed the wait time by scrolling up on a social media site. Some of the posts were interesting. One that caught his eye was an underground erotica between the U.S. president and his foreign gay lover. He'd have to remember to check that one out. Soon he found himself bored with that and jogged back upstairs. Shane plopped down in front of the old computer. He watched the cursor blink and zoned out for a few minutes. Shaking himself, he grabbed the box of discs and started flipping through them again. He and Jay had tried out almost every disc in the box throughout the day. Shane went to grab one of the adventure games he enjoyed earlier to play again when he dropped it. The floppies slid around the floor and Shane cursed to himself as he knelt to pick them all up. He stacked them neatly in his hands and flipped over the upside-down box. He noticed a peculiar disc he hadn't seen before. It was hidden under a hard plastic divider that had fallen flat against the bottom. It was different from the other discs. This one was a bright crimson color. He flipped it over and saw a slightly frayed label on the top corner of the disc. "The Killer Grins" was written in pen on the label. Next to it was a detailed drawing of a bloody skull with red ink for the blood. The name of the game and the crude drawing immediately piqued Shane's interest. He read online about extremely creepy older games that were made independently, with some of them being so twisted that no publisher would touch them. For that reason, they were usually either sold under the table by hobby shops or stealthily handed out among friends in school hallways. Shane set it aside and finished picking up the other discs. After setting them back into the box, he sat back in his computer chair and rubbed his hands together. Leaning forward, he inserted the crimson disc into the drive and locked it. He typed the run command, and the computer began its noisy process of loading the game. Instead of a loading screen, the display showed "Finding a Victim" in pixelated, blood-dripping letters. Shane looked at the screen with excitement while he tapped his fingers on the desk in anticipation. While waiting, there was a loud knock at the door. Shane ran down and looked through the peephole. He saw a 20-something woman holding a flat, square-shaped bag. She tapped her foot impatiently. He opened the door, paid the woman, and carried the pizza inside, kicking the door shut with his foot. After piling 5 pieces onto a plate, he ran back to his bedroom and saw the game displaying a message. "Are you ready for some bloody murder? Yes or no?" Shane typed Y and pressed enter with one hand while he stuffed pizza in his face with the other. The disk drive clicked for a short time and displayed a second question. "What is your name?" He shoved a half-eaten piece of pizza in his mouth and held it with his teeth as he typed his name and pressed enter. After a couple more minutes of loading, the screen displayed gameplay instructions. The rules are simple. Guide the killer to his victim. Use simple commands. The game will provide feedback on the killer's mood every few actions. The text will change to deeper shades of red the closer you get to the victim, as well as the background becoming more sinister and intense. Important: do not stop the game until he's killed his victim. Once the killer is summoned, it's best to give him what he wants. If you interrupt his fun, he may just turn on you. If you're truly ready, press enter. Shane read the warning with an amused smirk. After pressing the enter key, the screen displayed, summoning the killer in the same blood-dripping letters as the first loading screen. Ominous tones emitted from the game, which caused Shane's hair to stand on end. He was getting excited to start the game. It was now almost completely dark in his room, and he turned on a lamp to lessen the initial nervousness. The game appeared to be a text adventure and provided an introductory description. The killer awakens. His head feels fuzzy. He has slept a long time and is anxious to feed his primal desire. The blood sings to him, and thoughts of malicious violence disquiet his mind. His throat rattles with every raspy breath. He feels your presence and puts his actions into your willing and capable hands. Guide him, Shane. Shane read that and quivered. The game's music, coupled with the creepy description, gave him a feeling of immersion he was not used to with current games. He continued to read the screen. He is standing in a clearing. The forest around him moans eerily with the wind. The sun has just set, and he is ready. There is a path north and a less traveled path west. The killer waits. Shane thought about his choices for a second and decided to travel west. The forest clears into an empty lot behind a suburb still under construction. The dirt has been evened, perhaps in preparation for the building of a new home. There is a lone house in the distance north of the empty lot. The porch light is on. There is a large toolbox next to the lamppost. Shane paid close attention to the text. He noticed that the text had taken a very slight red hue, indicating that he had chose the right path and is getting closer to the victim. He tried to think of a simple command and assumed the words in all caps were interactive objects. He tried the first phrase that came to mind. Check toolbox. The large toolbox is a red metal container with a simple latch. Its red paint is chipped and scuffed all over. It is heavily dented from years of use. The killer waits. Shane thought for a moment. For his entire life, he'd been able to control an actual character and walk up to a box and press X to open it. He was not used to such a simple task requiring multiple commands. He sighed and typed a new one. Open toolbox. The large toolbox clanks loudly as he unclips the latch and opens the lid. It contains a pipe, a box cutter, and a screwdriver. The killer waits. He is excited. Shane assumed this was the part when he must pick whichever weapon he wanted the killer to use. After a quick mental game of eeny, meeny, miny, mo, he chose his weapon. He picks up the pipe. Holding the pipe in one hand, the killer slightly smacks it into the other, testing the weight and feel of the hits in his palm. Pipes make a big mess, and he likes big messes. He is still standing in the empty lot. There is a lone house north of the empty lot. The porch light is on. There is a large toolbox next to a lamppost that is open. The killer waits. The game did not appear to give Shane any other option than to go north. He decided to try something else, going back the way he came just to see what would happen. Go east. He is now back in the forest clearing holding a pipe. There is a path north and a less traveled path west. The killer is agitated. Shane observed that the text lost its slight red hue and has changed back to white. The game's killer obviously didn't like that, but it amused Shane, so he took it a little further. Go north. The path comes to a dead end. The killer is holding a pipe and now stands in front of a gated sewer drain set in concrete, heavily vandalized with vulgar graffiti. The only path here leads south, back to the forest clearing. The killer is very displeased. Shane laughed a little. Knowing there was nowhere else to go in the game, he entered several commands to get the killer back towards the house. He went past the empty lot and entered the command to approach. The text color takes on a deeper shade of red. Go north. The killer is now standing in front of a slightly run-down home holding a pipe. The porch light buzzes as moths dance around it. This appears to be the only occupied home near the new subdivision. The front door sits just in front of him. There is a path west to the side of the house. A garage sits east. The killer waits. Who knows? Maybe the front door is open, Shane thought. He slightly jiggles the doorknob. It doesn't give. The door is locked. Wishful thinking. Shane adjusted his seat and sat up straight. He pulled his chair closer to the desk and got comfortable. He noticed the game was not giving him many options for movement. It was almost as if it was programmed to be a quick game. He figured he would be getting close to the end, so he breathed deep and picked a path. Go west. The music suddenly got more distorted and demented sounding, startling Shane. The text is now colored a dull red. The killer now stands on the side of the house, holding a pipe. There is a large window here. It is cracked open. Look inside window. He sees a bedroom. An old man is fast asleep. The glow of the TV he left on dancing around the room. The TV is turned up fairly loud. The old man would be unlikely to hear him enter the room. The killer is breathing heavily. The text is now a deep red and the disturbing music is getting louder. Shane was starting to get a little apprehensive, but he continued on with the game. Open window. The window slides open smoothly with only a slight creak. He now stands on the side of the house, holding a pipe. There is a large window here. It is now fully open. The music continued to get louder and more unsteady. It began to really frighten Shane, and he looked for a volume knob to turn it down. Having failed to find one, he tried a command. Turn off music. The killer shakes his head slowly. What the hell? Shane read the message, eyes wide with disbelief. Sufficiently creeped out, he thought about quitting the game, but ultimately decided to continue. Enter window. The music's volume continued to escalate. Deep thumps along with frightening high pitches startled Shane. The text is now deep red and pixelated drips of blood slowly fall down the edges of the display. He now stands inside the bedroom, holding a pipe. His shadow cuts through the glow of the TV, looms over the old man who is still fast asleep. He is at the killer's mercy. The killer trembles with anticipation. Shane was trembling as well. The music was terrifying him. He looked out the bedroom door into the hallway. The hallway was pitch black. The sun had fully set by this time, and he had not bothered to turn on any lights. Breathing deep, Shane knew what he had to do to end the game. Slowly, with a novel sense of dread, he typed a command. Hit old man with pipe. He bent over the old man, raising his arm, holding the pipe. With violent force, he brings the pipe down on the old man. The collision of steel and bone make a sickening, crunching sound. The old man moans in pain and thrashes around, bleeding profusely from a massive head wound. He is not yet dead. The killer waits anxiously. "Dude, seriously? What the hell?" Shane said out loud. The music was now a deafening cacophony of horrific music, digitized screaming. Shane wanted it to stop, so he repeated the command, hoping it would finish the game. Hit old man with pipe. He strikes the old man again. The strike makes a wet, thumping noise against his head, and his wailing pain is now a gurgling whimper. The old man's arms curl up to his chest, his hands bending towards his wrists, making crinkled fists while his legs straighten out and his feet curl inward. The old man's head twitches, and his breathing becomes agonal and liquid-sounding. He suffers, severely brain damaged, bleeding profusely and in unspeakable pain. Yet, he is not dead. The killer speaks.
Do it, Shane.
At that moment, just as Shane read the text, he heard a whisper utter the same words from behind his ear. He jumped and turned around, breathing heavily and shaking. The music from the game was now unbearable. The blood-dripping graphics now formed a border around the edges of the screen. "No way, screw this shit, I'm done." Shane yelled over the game music. He sat down and typed a new command. "Quit game." "Are you sure?" "Yes or no." Shane emphatically pressed the Y key, followed by pressing the Enter key very hard. "It is highly advised not to quit before your task is complete. Are you absolutely sure you wish to quit now? Yes or no?" Shane repeated his action, once again typed and entered his decision. After striking the key with a loud click, the dripping blood border disappeared from the screen, and the music faded to dull, eerie chimes. Shane's heart raced as he watched more text scroll onto the screen. Blackness envelops the killer. He looks around, confused for a second before realizing what has happened. He's been banished to the darkness yet again, his trust betrayed by yet another master who promised to satisfy his vile urge, only to be denied at the last second. The killer is furious.
Next time, I'm coming for you, Shane.
The game is over, for now. The text began to slowly fade from the screen. Shane felt a wave of relief come over him. He reached to unlock the disc from the drive until he noticed something forming on the display. It was a blocky representation of a twisted, demonic face. The eyes were closed and yet uneven. Its mouth was contorted and much lower to the jaw than normal. The nose was missing entirely. The face on the display then opened its eyes and looked straight at Shane. It then opened its mouth and a loud, fuzzy, distorted scream emanated from the computer, causing Shane to step back and trip over his chair. He sat up and looked at his computer, which had finally gone back to a main screen, a small white cursor blinking away, waiting for input. He turned off the computer at this point and pulled out the disc. Shane put the disc back into the box of floppies with the others and slammed the case lid shut. Still unnerved, he turned out the light in his hallway outside his bedroom and walked downstairs, turning on the lights in the foyer, living room, and kitchen. When he reached the kitchen, he heated up a couple more pieces of pizza in the microwave to distract himself what had just occurred. As he busied himself with putting the rest back in the fridge, Shane began to feel a little better. He carried the plate of food out to the living room and lied down on the couch. He turned the TV on to a comedy show to help calm his nerves. After eating his pizza and having a few laughs, he relaxed significantly and wondered how the game got to him so much. It had been more terrifying than fun, but he was starting to chalk that up to playing it in the dark and being home alone. After about an hour of watching TV, he started getting comfortable. His heart was no longer racing, and his paranoia had subsided. He finally felt the calming relief one often experiences after a highly stressful encounter and fell asleep on the couch. The next morning, Shane woke up to the sun shining through the living room window. He lifted his arms and stretched and sighed deeply. He looked around the living room. He realized sheepishly that he left the TV on and most of the lights. In the light of day, after the terror of the game had diminished, Shane wondered how he could have been so scared by an antiquated game. He walked around the house, turning off lights and tidying up a little. He decided to heat up the last pieces of pizza. He chuckled to himself as he realized that he now, for the first time ever, single-handedly eaten an entire pizza. With the daylight came relaxation. The stressful memory of last night felt surreal now. He picked up his phone and texted Jay to see if he was coming back over later. Jay responded that he would be over soon and that he had something important to tell him. Shane ate, showered, wrapped a towel around his waist. He took a minute to call his mom and check in with her. He then went to his room to get fully dressed. He shuddered slightly as he walked by the computer. A feeling of dread and fear washed over him as he remembered the terrifying game last night. He reflected on the experience as he ruffled through the dresser to find a shirt. With the calm of daylight, he was able to sort through the experience without the intensity of the fear he had felt last night. He admired the ingenuity it took to program such a simple game that could get such a rise out of a player, especially being a game that was from 3 decades ago. Thinking back on it, he decided it felt more exhilarating than terrifying now, and he intended to show the game to Jay when he arrived. Just as Shane jogged downstairs, he heard a knock on his front door. He opened it up to let Jay in, who promptly shoved his way past. "Dude!" Jay exclaimed. Shane let out a huff of laughter. "Come right on in." Jay seemed very agitated as he turned to look at Shane. Shane could tell that something had happened, but he didn't know what. Jay hopped back and forth between each foot as he started to talk. "You know Old Man Thompson? The guy who always yells at the kids who cut through his yard?" Shane didn't know where he was going with this, but decided to play along anyway. Yeah, of course, I know who you're talking about." Old Man Thompson was a widower, lived at the edge of town. He was a grumpy old man who yelled at all the kids and never took it further. Shane always thought that he secretly liked having the kids around to yell at. Shane let out a rush of air. "I heard my parents talking that someone bashed his head in last night. Took a pipe, they think, and just beat him while he was sleeping. Can you imagine? We never have that kind of stuff happen around here. He's at the hospital right now. They don't think he'll live through it." Shane stood there in silence. He thought back to the game last night and how similar the scene was to Thompson's house and the way he was beaten. No fucking way, man. Shit, man, that really sucks. He was kind of a grumpy bastard, but he was never really that mean. Shane plopped down on the couch. Jay sat down next to him. "I know, I feel really bad for him. That's some rough shit." They sat in silence for a few seconds. "Anyway, so you know how I was telling you about my dad and Josh Simmons last night? Well, it turns out Josh disappeared after playing some really messed up game on his computer. He apparently went to a computer club meetup and this creepy dude gave it to him to try it out. My dad was with him when Josh played it and scared the crap out of both of them. My dad went home feeling really weirded out by it. A couple days later, he went to visit Josh, and that's when he found out he was missing. I asked him what the game was called, and he said it was Killer something or other." Shane tilted his head and gave his friend a strange look. "Killer Grins?" Jay shook his head a little, pointing a finger at Shane. "Yeah, it's something like that. My dad wasn't sure other than it had Killer in the title. I didn't see that game in a disc box yesterday, though. I flipped through it multiple times. Either way, I wouldn't worry too much. It's just a really creepy coincidence." Shane swallowed hard. The intensity of last night came crashing down back on him. He stared ahead, unable to get the unsettling music of the game out. "Jay, I found the game he's talking about. I dropped a box on my floor last night, and it was this bright red disc hidden under the pile." "Whoa, really? Cool, you found it. Did you play it?" Shane nodded. "Yeah, I did. Your dad's right. That game is pure insanity. It scared the shit out of me so much I couldn't even finish it." "That good, huh?" "Yeah, but it was really super strange. It's one of those old as dirt text adventure games like Zork, but it had this real mental shit going on with it. You basically control the psycho murderer and you're supposed to lead him to his next victim and help them kill him. It even warns you not to quit the game before you finish." Jay grimaced a little. "Yeah, dude, tell me about it." Anyway, it constantly had this loud, creepy music playing, and it gets louder the closer you get to the victim. The words on the screen turn darker shades of red as well. And here's the scariest part. The game keeps you notified of the killer's demeanor as you play. I purposely send him to the wrong way after going the right way and was telling me I upset him. Then, when I got to the victim, I quit the game before I could kill him, and the killer threatened to come after me next. Shane's mouth went agape. So, like, it said your name and everything? Yeah, man, it was scary. Jay thought for a second. Well, did it have you enter your name at the start? Yeah, it did, Shane replied. The worst part about it is that the killer went after an old man in an old house with a pipe. That's when I quit the game and the killer got mad. Jay then rolled his eyes and laughed. Dude, the game was just screwing with you. You know how RPG games always have you enter a name for your character, and it shows your name in dialogue throughout? It's the same in this game. It stores your name in some variable and calls on it at certain parts of the game. Older games like that needed some kind of involvement from you to make up for their technological shortcomings. As for the similarity between your game and Old Man Thompson, there's no way. It's just a sick coincidence. Man, you really bought into that, didn't you? Hey, come on now. It was dark, and that music plays as scary as fuck, Shane said, defending himself from his friend's teasing laughter. And you told me about Thompson. All right, care if I try it out? Yeah, sure. The boys went upstairs, and Jay sat in a desk chair as Shane set himself down on the edge of the bed. Jay found the red disc, locked it in the drive, and loaded it up. However, after a minute of more clicks and floppy drive beeps, the game did not load. Instead, there was only a message. The killer does not play during the day. Wait for the darkness. Irritated, Jay tried typing a few keys, tapping the escape key and a few other combinations of keystrokes, to no avail. He turned off the computer and turned it back on. Once the cursor came back, he reloaded the game, only to be met with the same message. Okay, so the game doesn't like the daytime. Well, there's ways around that, he said with a mischievous tone. He once again restarted the computer to the cursor prompt and typed in a date and time query. He changed the computer time to 9 p.m., hoping the game would load now that he made the device think it was nighttime. He reloaded the game, and much to his surprise, he was greeted with a new message. The killer is insulted by your attempt to fool him. Wait for the darkness. Jay read the text, and his face gave way to an impressed smirk. Wow, whoever coded this game knew what the hell they were doing. I can't think of how they could make it that smart. Shane nodded. See what I mean? This game doesn't mess around. Guess we'll just have to find something to do until night. Jay shook his head and stood up. Nah, man, I gotta watch my sister again in a little bit. My parents promised to be home for dinner tonight, so I'll probably head over then. Either way, I want to see if this game is really as intense as you say it is. I've been wanting to play a good horror game for a while. All right. I'll order us another pizza tonight. Sound good? Shane asked. Sounds good. Hopefully my parents don't stay out too late. They tend to promise me a certain time and then not come home until midnight or something, pretty much keeping me grounded like all day. They walked out of Shane's bedroom and started down the stairs. He walked Jay out his front door when Shane noticed the old woman across the street taking her tables and packing the things that she didn't sell back into her garage. She caught his glance and smiled and waved at him. Shane meekly waved back and returned a half-smile in kind before sliding his head back inside and shutting the door. He looked around his house, feeling bored. He paced a while, trying to think of some way to kill time. He looked around the kitchen and decided eating out of boredom. He finally sat down on his living room couch and lazily channel surfed in between bouts of playing around on his phone, clicking his tongue to amuse himself. Clouds rolled in as night fell. Shane texted Jay asking if he was still coming over. After getting no response, Shane shrugged and called his pizza order in. He went upstairs to his bedroom and turned his lamp on as he sat down in front of his desk. He flipped the power switch on the computer, and it hummed and clicked to life as he flipped through the discs, trying to decide what to play. He wasn't looking to play the game from last night again. He figured he would save that experience for Jay. He wanted a nice, relaxed, low-key night. Shane started to hear the rumbles of thunder from outside. He went to load one of the adventure games he tried out yesterday. It was the one he originally planned to play last night when he knocked over the box of floppies and discovered the red disc. He inserted the adventure game and typed the load command. The disk drive beeped and clicked for a minute before making a slight grinding sound, then went completely silent. Shane was checking his phone while the disk loaded, so went unnoticed for a few minutes until he looked at the computer screen. It was showing a load error message. The indicator light on the disk drive was flashing steadily. Shane grimaced at that. With a shrug, he pulled the adventure game out of the drive and inserted another. This one a light-hearted arcade shooter. Yet upon trying to load this one, he got the same error message. Starting to get frustrated, he inserted other discs one by one, each one generating the same load error message. Starting to think the drive was broken, he casually examined it before setting it back down, looking at the red disc. It was the only one he hadn't tried. Slumping his shoulders and sighing heavily, he reluctantly grabbed the disc and slowly inserted it into the drive, carefully turning the locking arm that secured it with a springy, clicking noise. He hesitantly entered the load command and listened as the disk drive responded with mechanical functions. After a few minutes, the familiar bleeding letters came across the screen. Finding a victim. "You've got to be kidding me, seriously?" Shane said in disbelief. It was the only game that would load on his computer. He was staring at the display when a hard knock sounded on his front door. Shane found it strange that the pizza arrived last night during the same scenario, waiting for the game to load. He ran downstairs and looked through the peephole to find the same impatient delivery girl tapping her foot, holding a flat, square bag containing his pizza. It was raining now, low rumbles of thunder echoing through the sky. She was tapping her foot even faster tonight. She was lightly pelted with the incoming rain. Shane opened the door and handed her the money, along with a more sizable tip than last night. Her irritation gave way to a quick smile as she ran back to her car. Just as she slammed her door shut, the light rain evolved into a hard downpour, accompanied by flashes of lightning. Shane shut the door and walked the pizza into the kitchen, setting his phone down on the counter and loading up his plate with several slices before walking upstairs to his bedroom. He sat down at his desk and saw that his game had loaded, asking him the same question as last night. "Are you ready for some bloody murder? Yes or no?" Shane looked at the screen and pondered as he ate his first slice of pizza. It was storming hard outside now, and he hesitated to start the game. He hadn't particularly wanted to play this tonight, especially after last night. But then he thought about what Jay said to him earlier. These games were dependent on playing with your fears to immerse you in the game. Shane laughed at himself over how upset he got last night. He decided he would try the game once more, if for no other reason than to prove to himself that he wasn't scared of a 30-year-old game. He typed Y and pressed enter. "Welcome back, Shane. You already know the rules." Huh. How does it know it's me? He thought. After a moment, he chalked it up to the game just calling on a save file. He read the display as more text scrolled onto the screen. The night before, he chickened out at the last minute. Coward. The killer has found a new victim, however. Because he has a good feeling about this one, he has agreed to work with you one last time. You will not be allowed to quit this time. Are you ready to begin? Yes or no? Shane skimmed the text, concentrating on a second piece of pizza. After reaching the question at the end, he pressed Y and enter. Just as he submitted his answer, a large burst of lightning flashed through his window, followed by a massive roar of thunder. The walls shook, making Shane look over his shoulder for a moment. He rolled out his window as the wind roared, and the rain pelted his roof hard enough to hear it. Shane sat back down at his desk, starting to feel slightly uneasy, and looked at the display. The killer awakens. His head is clear. The voices are calm tonight, as the killer knows exactly what he wants. He is focused, motivated, and more than ready to finally have his kill. He knows you're with him and places his control in your hands. He knows that tonight he will not be denied. He is standing in a small park. It is storming out, and there is a house in the distance, south of where he is standing. There is a faint light emitting from the upstairs window of the house. The killer waits impatiently. Shane read the introduction. It was different from last night. He didn't remember any games of this type having more than one scenario. He shrugged and started the game. Go south. He is standing in front of a fence. The house is now perfectly visible even through the hard rain. He sees the light from the upstairs window much clearer now, and notices the shadow of someone in the light. There is a gate to his left. The killer is anxious. Shane frowned a little, disappointed that the game did not give him multiple paths to go on. Seems like this time it wants to make sure he goes where he's supposed to go. Feeling strange, he continues on with the game. Open gate. Just as Shane enters the command, another loud boom of thunder shakes the house. The gate opens easily. The creaking of the rusted metal hinges is muffled by a fortunate strike of thunder. He steps through slowly and closes the gate behind him. He now stands in the backyard of the house. There is a brick patio that leads to a sliding door. A covered grill sits to the right. There is a loose brick on the edge of the patio. There is a path leading east that curves around a bend to the front of the house. No choice of weapon this time? Shane thought. He wasn't staying very interested in the game. There was no music either, only the sound of thunder and rain from the outside. He sighed and decided to do the obvious. Pick up brick. The killer shakes his head in refusal. He's feeling a little more hands-on tonight. The killer cracks his knuckles one by one. Shane squinted his eyes a little. The game was starting to unnerve him, but he breathed deep, sat up in his chair and typed another option. Open sliding door. The killer carefully grabs the door handle and pulls. The sliding door is locked. It is no match for his strength and could easily smash through it. The killer waits. Shane wanted to succeed this time around, and he figured going in loud would not be smart, so he opted to find a different way. Go east. The killer is now standing at the front door of the house. The rain falls mercilessly on him as he stares at the door. There are large windows to either side of him, blocked off by thick shrubbery. The killer waits. Shane was becoming further disappointed by the ease of progression. The game had remained quiet, strangely missing the music and red text that had added so much to the intensity of the game last night. Once again, he typed in the only command he could think of, accompanied by another strong rumble of thunder. The text now began to show a shade of red. The creeping music had started quietly, making Shane's hair stand on end. Open front door. Much to the killer's surprise, the door opens easily and quietly. He shuts the door behind him and observes the house. He stands in a living room. A TV sits to his left. There is a kitchen just west of the living room. A bathroom door is open straight ahead from the entrance, and there is a staircase next to it leading to the second floor of the house. The killer waits. He is growing restless. Shane arched an eyebrow as he read the description of the house layout. He pictured in his head how it would look when walking through his own front door and realized that the game's description of the house seemed eerily familiar to his own. Cautiously, he typed in a command. Go west. He now stands in a dark kitchen. The lights are off, but in the darkness, he can clearly see the outline of a cracked open pizza box. Next to it sits a cellular phone. A blue light in the corner of the device blinks. The color drained from Shane's face, and his chest tightened as he read the text on the screen. The game's creepy music was growing louder as the realization came upon him. There's no way. They didn't have cell phones like that 30 years ago. No way this can't be real. Shane thought his heart began pounding. As he finished his thought, another line of text generated on the screen. It was deep red. The killer feels his victim's fear. His victim understands now. The killer speaks.
Hello, Shane. Nice house you have here.
Pixelated, bloody border came around the edges of the display. The music quickly grew loud and distorted as Shane gasped. His hands started trembling as he tried to enter a final command. Quick game. The music stopped. The screen went black, and all was quiet in Shane's bedroom. The only sounds left were the rain pelting his roof and his own shaking breathing. He stared at his screen, wondering whether what had just transpired was real. He watched the blinking cursor in the upper left corner of the display as it slowly turned a deeper shade of red with every blink. Finally, new lines of text scrolled onto his screen. There is no quitting this time. The killer speaks.
Oh, it's far too late for that, Shane. I know where you are. Your fear is exquisite. I am coming for you.
Shane was despondent with absolute fear. He lunged under the desk and pulled the power cord from the computer from his wall outlet. He looked up to see the screen still lit. The terrifying music from the game was louder than ever. The bloody border around the display grew more intense until the screen itself began bleeding. Thick crimson ooze that crawled a trail of red down the screen. The music went from a digital cacophony of electronic noise to a crescendo of fear-inducing tones inside Shane's head. He panicked as he tried to figure out what to do. The computer was now displaying every move the killer made. He is now walking slowly up the stairs. He is locked onto his victim's fear and is fueled by it. The terror he feels emanating from the bedroom has invigorated the killer in ways he's never felt before. This will be deeply satisfying for him. Shane listened as he heard deep, loud steps outside of his bedroom door. He shook uncontrollably, frozen in place. His mind was a blank cloud of primal fear. He looked out the window, thinking for a second about jumping out. There was no roof or awning to land on. Just wet ground that would not provide a safe landing. It was a straight drop outside the window, and Shane whimpered in futile terror as he heard the steps get closer to his door. The killer is now standing just outside the bedroom door. He breathes deep, taking in the cloud of fright that permeates the entire upstairs. He feels pure ecstasy, knowing that his goal quivers like a cornered rabbit just beyond this door. The killer is elated. Shane looked at the screen in absolute disbelief of everything around him and watched the single letters popped up one at a time to spell something that made him almost faint from shock. Open bedroom door. As the phrase finished, he heard his doorknob turn. The door creaked open slowly. An enormous shadow took 2 extremely heavy steps into the bedroom and looked down at Shane. His face looked like the one from the game that had screamed the night before. His sunken, uneven eyes looked down, his pupils reflecting the dim glow of the computer display. His breathing was hard and rattling. The display generated more words to describe the events unfolding. The killer looks at his victim, who was blubbering on the floor, curled up like a weak prey animal. He observes a wet spot on his groin. The young man has soiled himself. He whimpers and cries pathetically. The killer is going to take great pleasure in ending his miserable existence. He picks Shane up by his face, using a single massive hand to completely envelop his head. The killer squeezed hard as he tried to dampen his screams. Shane flailed and kicked about in utter futility. The killer exerted more force in his grip, feeling the young man's jawbone give way with a muffled crunch. He dropped Shane to the floor, who rolled onto his stomach while attempting to crawl away, wailing from his injury. The killer put a large boot on Shane's spine and pushed down until he felt it snap with a muted thud. Shane howled, his voice crackling. Now useless legs twitched, feet tapping uncontrollably on the floor as his newly severed nerve endings went into a frenzy. The killer reveled in his victim's pain. His victim's screams faded, and his breath grew shallow. Knowing that Shane's time was now short, he wanted to make this kill extra special. The killer grabbed Shane by the head once more, cradling his chest in one large forearm as he reached around to hold the body steady. With some straining, he twisted and pulled on Shane's head while he anchored his body still. Shane screamed as he felt the muscles and tendons in his neck stretch and tear. The killer wrenched Shane's head back and forth through his liquid screaming. Shane felt blood pool into his mouth and throat. He gurgled and moaned as his eyes rolled into the back of his head. His vision blurred and his hearing degraded to a shrill ringing. He was just conscious enough to feel the indescribable pain. With a final snap, he felt the weight of his body give way. He felt his head lift off the ground, and he was turned to face the computer screen. His sensations declined rapidly, and with the last vestiges of life draining from his severed head, he managed to read the last couple of lines of text from the game before a black fog enveloped both of them. The killer has completed his task, and the killer grins.